and welcome to the HTML Level 1 section of the course. It's time to start learning about HTML. This section of the course is going to start off just by covering the very basics of HTML. And HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's one of the most basic building blocks of the web, and every website will need it in some form or another. It's our first fundamental step in understanding how to actually build a web application. Later on in future sections of the course, we're going to be learning about other technologies, such as CSS to style the HTML, and JavaScript to add a functionality. Then in future sections, such as the Python and Django sections of the course, we're going to learn how to add Django template tags, connect it with Python and HTML to dynamically generate content based off a user's interaction with the website. However, all of that is still quite a bit away, and we need to start off with the very basic fundamentals of HTML, and that's Level 1. In Level 1, we're going to be discussing the following topics: HTML basics, tagging with HTML, how to create lists in HTML, what divs and spans are, and then attributes in HTML. Okay, one quick final note. Remember, as you code along with the course, you can always reference the corresponding lecture notes to check your code. Let's everyone, and welcome back to the Part 1 HTML Basics lecture. Let's start off by exploring the very basics of what an HTML file looks like and how we can open it in a browser. Plus, we'll learn about some Atom Text Editor convenience features to quickly create HTML files. I'm going to jump to the Atom Text Editor now. Alright, here I am at the Atom Text Editor. As a quick note, you can either just code along and create new files in the project folders that are provided for you as a download to the course, or you can add your new project folders or new files as you go along. It's really up to you. You can always just right-click and click a new file, new folder, or just add a whole new project folder so you can see a new folder over here. It's really up to you. I've already created a project folder. I've called it HTML_level_1. And another quick note, try to avoid using just spaces in your folder names and in your file names. You should always try to replace them with something like an underscore to make sure that you can read the whole file path with your computer. Sometimes spaces will mess a computer up in reading the actual file path. So just a quick note on that. Okay, let's start off by creating a new file, and we will call it basics.html. And we can do uppercase or lowercase here. I'll just keep it simple with lowercase because that's usually what they look like. Alright, so here's basics.html, and one thing I want to show you is I can begin to type HTML, and you'll notice that Atom Text Editor has this little pop-up that says HTML. If I hit enter when I see that pop-up, I will get the basically boilerplate code, as it's called, or the skeleton code of an HTML file. Now let's walk through this and explain what's actually going on. In this very first line, we see something that says doctype HTML. And that's something you're going to find in pretty much all HTML files, and that basically just tells the browser, hey, you're looking at an HTML file. And then we have the HTML tags. You'll notice we have an opening tag here at the line number 2, and a closing tag over at line number 10. And the difference between an opening and a closing tag is it just lets you know when it starts and when it stops. And the closing, we'll notice, has a little / in it. And what's nice about Atom Text Editor is you'll see these little arrows pop up, which just allow you to collapse or open things between their opening and closing tags. So that's just for organization. Then we have two major sections: the head of the HTML file and the body of the HTML file. Let's start off by just explaining what the head is. The head of the HTML, which is this first section, is going to contain the metadata. And for this first section of the course, the HTML Level 1, we won't be doing a whole lot with the actual head of the HTML. That will come into play a lot more when we actually use CSS and JavaScript. But it's going to mainly serve as how to link your HTML document to other types of files, such as your CSS file or your .js JavaScript file. But another tag that we notice that's an HTML head is this title tag. And that's basically what's going to show up as the title when you open this up in a browser. And the title is just what's shown in the tab. So I'm going to type in between this title tag, something like this is the title, ! And notice I don't need any quotes here. It's just pure text in between these tags, and HTML will recognize it. And then this other meta data is just telling you what character set you would expect, and that's UTF-8 encoding. Don't worry about that too much right now. Then finally we have the body, and the body is going to contain the actual content. We're going to be discussing actual content such as paragraphs and lists, etc. throughout this section of the course. Right now we'll leave the body blank. The last thing I want to show you before we actually view this HTML file in our browser is how to comment code. So in HTML, comments look like this. You do a opening tag, exclamation mark, dash dash, and that says that's the start of the comment, and then the end of the comment is dash dash, that other closing sign. And then anything here is a comment. The other quick way to do this is if you have some text or a line of code, you can just do Control or Command, depending on your OS, /, and Atom and Sublime Text Editor will actually just auto comment everything there. Or if you wanted to, you can actually highlight many lines and then do Control / to comment or Control / to uncomment. All right, so anything in between those two types of tags is a comment, and it's just Control or Command / to quickly make a line or multiple lines in actual comment. I'm going to do Control S here to save this, and let's open this up in our browser. So the way we open this up in our browser is by just passing in the entire file path into the browser. For now, we're going to be just running things locally, so that's how it will work. I'm going to right-click on my HTML file and then say copy full path. So I will copy the full path to that, and then let me bring in a browser window. And here's a browser window, and what I can do is right where my URL browser usually goes, I'm going to just copy and paste that file path. So this is just the whole file path to that actual HTML file. I hit enter, and I notice something that's just basically a blank page. And that makes sense. We haven't provided any content or HTML content in the body of our HTML file. But what we do notice is this. Our little "this is the title" in the title actually showed up. Perfect. So that's really all there is for the very basics of an HTML file. What an HTML file mostly will be, as we work with it, are the actual body tags. So let's go ahead and continue on by editing this file with body tags in part 2 in the next lecture. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you there. Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2, the basic tagging lecture. In this lecture, we're going to go over some basic heading and paragraph tags. And tags are basically a way to allow you to insert elements into an HTML file. And we're also going to be showing you a few resources to use as a reference as you continue learning about HTML. Let's go ahead and get started by opening our Atom text editor and a browser. I'll see you there. All right, here I have a split screen between the Atom text editor and my browser. And this is actually a view we're going to be using a lot in the course because we'd like to see changes and not have to jump back and forth between the browser and the text editor. So a lot of times you'll see me just have a split screen like this, so I can just refresh the page in the browser when I'm actually doing edits in the Atom text editor. But before we get started on continuing working with this basics.html file from the last lecture, what I want to discuss are 2 resources online that you're going to be running into a lot as you do some Google searches for terms in case you ever need to reference some sort of resource. And those 2 resources are something called w3schools.com, and the other one is the developer.mozilla.org website. And here I've just searched for HTML element tags on Google. You'll notice that the very first hit is this w3schools.com. And usually when you ask Google for some basic question on HTML or CSS, a lot of times the very first link that pops up is a w3schools.com. And w3schools.com is basically just a very large reference site for front-end web development like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And you'll notice that as you go through the website, it'll basically just give you a bunch of resources and references for a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about in this course. So if you ever Google stuff and you find yourself on this website, feel free to check it out. Now, it's an okay website. Mainly the main reason you see it as the top hit is just because it's been around so long. But I would actually suggest that when you're Google searching and you come up with a reference to this developer.mozilla.org site, you actually choose this site instead. It's a little better, it has more detail, and it's really geared towards developers. So if you click on this developer.mozilla.org link, it has an HTML element reference, and this is basically a reference to all the HTML elements. And HTML elements are just going to allow us to actually insert material into our HTML text file. And you see here that it's a little more technical and it's a little more geared towards developers, while the w3schools.com website is geared more towards basic beginners. And as you advance through this course, you're probably going to find this developer.mozilla.org site more useful to you. So I just want to let you know that these are 2 resources you're going to be coming through in contact with a lot as you do some Google searching on your own. Okay, now that we've covered that, let's jump back to this browser tab where I have the basics.html file that we've been working with last time opened up here. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up here. And to get a little more room on my screen, I'm actually going to close or collapse this left tab here. And I can do that just by doing either Control / or Command / on your keyboard. And that just opens and collapses that little side tab. So a really useful shortcut for the Atom text editor. Now the first tag we're going to be learning about are the header tags, or a heading tag. And let's show you how to do that. To start off, we'll do a heading 1 tag, or a header 1 tag. And basically, we just have h1 open, and then h1 closed. And then anything in between this, any text, is going to be a header. So this is a, we'll call them heading 1. And then I'm going to save this. So just either Control or Command S, make sure that's saved, and I'm going to refresh this. And we see now, on our web page, we see this is a heading 1. And basically, a heading produces a larger font that is bold. And we're going to learn a lot more about how to actually dictate text styles, such as font size, whether something is bold or italic, later on in the course. We'll cover a little bit about bold and italics in this lecture, but later on we'll actually talk about more styling for this actual font. For now, we can just explore the very basics of HTML and what your browser does by default. If heading 1 is too big for you, well, you can actually have heading 2. And you'll notice that Atom Text Editor actually provides us with these autocomplete options. So you can just go down here on your keyboard and then hit enter on one of these. And you'll notice we automatically get the opening and closing tag. So you'll find yourself using that a lot as you continue on through this course. And we'll type something like, this is a heading 2. Save that, and then refresh our page here. And we see we get a same heading, so it's in bold, but it's a little smaller. And there's actually a heading 3, so we can do that as well. We'll call this heading 3, save this, refresh, and we notice we get an even smaller heading, etc. And this actually goes all the way down to heading 6, which is going to be the smallest heading possible. So you'll notice that it's actually still in bold, but it's very small. If you just want essentially what is a normal text size, you can use what is known as a paragraph. And that's just a P. So I'm going to write this is a paragraph. 1G, save this, and then refresh. And you'll notice that we get this is a paragraph, which is just here in normal text. It's not in bold, and we're ready to go there. But something to note is that each of these lines with the new tags is basically in its own block. And headings are their own block, as well as paragraphs. So paragraph tags can actually create separation. And let me show you what I mean by that. If I, over here in my HTML file, try to write on multiple lines, so I say this is a paragraph, this is line 2, then this is line 3. If I save this and then refresh this, notice that I don't actually get that effect that I was looking for in my HTML file when it gets displayed in my browser. It all goes into one continuous line. If I actually want separate blocks, I need to separate them into actual different tags, which means I would need to have each of these separate lines in its own paragraph tag. So I would have to have this be, this is line 2, and then this one be line 3. So this is line 3 right here, and paste it in, and then grab this closing tag and let's stick it back to the original right there. Now let's save this, and if we refresh this, we can see that now they're all in their separate blocks. And something to note here is that your HTML file doesn't really care about indentation. What it really cares about are just these tags. That's what's really going to define how lines are built and how blocks are separated. So I can actually put multiple paragraph tags on the same line here. So we'll do this, put them all on line 14, just to show you what I mean. So here I have all those 3 paragraph tags on the same line. They're all on line 14. If I save this again and refresh, I get the exact same effect. So it's really the tags that are telling HTML what is in the same block, not the actual line number or the indentation. In other programming languages, you'll use brackets, or in Python, you a lot of times use indentation to clarify which blocks goes where. In HTML, it's basically all done by tags. And you notice I can keep writing on separate lines here. So whoops, let's delete that. Say something like, this is continued. I'm still writing in line 2, save this, and if I refresh this, you notice that since that's all contained in this second paragraph tag, it all goes here. All right. So that's the very basics of what a heading tag is and what a paragraph tag is. Things to note there is that headings can go from 1 to 6, so H1 to H6, and what makes them a little different is their size and the fact that they're in bold. And then we have, for normal text, paragraph tags. And something that'll be really useful is a lot of times you need filler text, and what Atom Text Editor and Sublime Text Editor have for you is the lorem ipsum statement, which is basically just a bunch of filler Latin text. And if you start typing lorem, notice you get this little pop-up here. Go ahead and just select that and hit enter. And you'll get a bunch of code, or text here, I should say. And it's basically just a bunch of filler text that's really common to use in web development in case you just need some filler text. So if I save this and refresh this page, notice now I get, it tells me if I want to translate it. No, because it's in Latin. But you just get a bunch of filler text here in Latin. So this is really common to use as you need filler code for your web development. And you can do it just by typing in lorem and then hitting enter in either Sublime Text Editor or an Atom Text Editor. It works in both. All right, saving that there, let's refresh this. And I remove that. The last thing I want to cover is bold and italics. Now, there was actually an old way of showing bold and italics in HTML, and there's a newer syntax for it. Let me show you the old way first, and then I'll show you the new way. So let me delete these paragraphs and just type in something very simple. We'll say this is text that is in bold, and then below it we'll say this is text that is in italics. Italics. Okay, so if I actually want to make this bold, the old way would be to do it with a B call. So what I would end up doing is wrapping this whole thing, or whatever I want it to be bold, in B. So it would look like this. So we call our closing tag B here. And if you just type in B, Atom Text Editor will also give you the autocomplete for the bold. I'm going to save this and then refresh. And notice here that it says now this is text that is in bold. So this is the old way of doing bold text. And the old way of doing italic text is with an I call, or an I tag. So we'll notice here we see I for italic, which means if I wrap this whole thing in open and close I tags, and save this and refresh, I get now that this text is in italics here. So we can see that this is text that is in bold, and this is text that is in italics. That was the old way of doing things. There's a newer semantic way because B and I aren't very clear on exactly what they're doing since they're just two letters. And you always want to be really clear when you're coding, especially if you're going to come look at this code in the future. So the newer semantic way of doing stuff is if you want text to be bold, the new keyword for that is a strong tag. So this works in basically exactly the same way as the bold tag, except now it just says strong. So that might be a little clearer when you come back to your code that you know that it's going to be in bold. And we see here there's no change as I refresh because that's just a new syntax. And now for italics, the new syntax is EM for emphasis or emphasized. So if you want to add emphasis to text, you would italicize it. Or with the new tagging syntax, it's EM for emphasis. So save this, refresh, and we see here there's no change because that still works exactly the same way. So again, the old way is with the B and I tags. The newer way, which is the way I would suggest doing it as you go throughout this course, is the strong tag and the EM for emphasis tag. All right, that's really all there is to this lecture. Hopefully you found it pretty straightforward. Again, you may want to play around with different headers, adding more paragraphs, etc. But everything should have been straightforward right now. All we've covered is just a few basic tags such as heading tags, paragraph tags, and bold and italics. Okay, thanks everyone, and I will see you at the next lecture. Hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 of HTML Level 1, where we discuss how to create a list in HTML. A lot of times you want to get your information on your HTML page organized, and one way to do this is with a list. And HTML has two main types of lists. That's an ordered list and an unordered list. And we can actually then add list elements to each of these types. Let's get started by jumping to the Atom Text Editor in our browser. Alright, here I am with my Atom Text Editor open, and I have right now just the simple basics.html document we've been working with, and I've deleted everything but left one heading 1 that says lists on it. let me first show you how to create an ordered list. Now an ordered list is numbered, so you can see number 1, the first item, number 2, the second item, etc. So to start off with an ordered list, you just type OL, and then you can click enter here, and Atom Text Editor will automatically create the opening tag and closing tag for you. And then inside of this ordered list, you're going to have list elements. If I save this and then refresh my page, you'll notice nothing's actually changed. So I do have an ordered list there, but with no elements in it. To create a list item or a list element, it's just LI to be your tag, and then whatever you want in there. So in this case, we'll just say first item. Going to save that and refresh this, and I see now I have my one first item. And let me zoom in here a little bit. I'm just going to do Control+ to zoom in on this HTML so we can see it a little better here. So here's my first item, and as I continue to add list elements into this ordered list, such as my second item, save this and refresh the page, you can see here that they are numbered. And this will continue on as long as I just keep adding items into this actual list. So third item there, refresh, and here we can see the numbering. Now later on with CSS, you can actually change the numbers if you want to use something like Roman numerals, etc. But this is the very basic default of an HTML ordered list. Now, a lot of times you actually don't want to number things, you just want some sort of bullet point. And if you want that, then what you're looking for is an unordered list. And to create an unordered list, you use the tag UL for unordered list. So UL, I'll hit enter there. It creates the opening and closing tags for me. And now as I add list items, we'll say bullet 1 here, add another item here, we'll say second item, and you can really add whatever text you want here. We'll do LI enter here, and then we'll say third item. I'm going to save this and refresh, and now you see I have an unordered list where there is no number, but everything is just a bullet point. And that's the main difference between an ordered list, OL, and an unordered list, UL. And the last thing I want to cover quickly here is a nested list. So you can actually nest lists inside of each other. And you can nest an ordered list inside of an unordered list or vice versa. Let me show you an example of this. And I'll show you kind of an extreme example of nesting lists. So you usually won't see that many lists nested into each other, but I just want to show you this so you can get an idea of what's possible. So here's an ordered list, and I'm going to have two items in it first. Item 1, and then item 2. And I'm just using the autocomplete there with enter to make that a little quicker. So here's item 1, here's item 2, and they're numbered because they're inside an ordered list. And now I'm going to put an unordered list. Inside of these ordered list tags, I put in that unordered list, which means if I add some new list elements, they'll be inside. So I'm just going to say something like I'm nested inside for that list item. And here I'll make another list item that says also nested, exclamation mark. We'll save that, refresh this, and we can see here that with that nesting, we also get an extra indentation. So HTML can show that this is nested inside of this list. So if we wanted to, we could say item 1, item 2, and then we could say these are like sub-items of item 2 that is an unordered list. And we can actually keep going with this. So if you wanted something further nested in, we could put an ordered list in there, and then say something like, whoa, I'm really nested, exclamation mark. And let's emphasize this by putting some of this in bold. So remember that we have the strong tag to put something in bold, and I'm going to put whoa in there. There we go. Now let's save that, refresh this, and we can see here item 1, item 2, we have this nested unordered list, and then whoa, I'm really nested there. So that's just a very quick example of nesting lists. We're not going to do it too often in the course, but I just want you to be aware of the ability to do that. All right, so that's really all there is for lists themselves. It's a pretty basic topic. Remember, you essentially have this OL for ordered list and UL for unordered list. And then inside of either of these, every item in that list is going to have an LI tag for a list element. Okay, thanks everyone, and I will see you at the next lecture. Hello everyone, and welcome to Part 4, Divs and Spans. So in this lecture, we're going to be showing you some examples of how to use a div and a span tag. However, keep in mind that we actually won't really be able to utilize them until we learn about CSS. Basically, we're going to be using div and span tags to actually group together blocks of HTML. And the reason we want to group them together, usually, is to apply CSS to them. So keep that in mind as we learn about them. In this lecture, they probably won't seem to take any effect into account, but later on we will see how they are useful when adding in style of CSS. Let's jump to the Atom text editor just to show you how they work. Okay, so here I am at the Atom text editor, and I also have my browser open. I'm a little zoomed in here so we can see the text clearly. Right now I just have a heading 1 here. Let me go ahead and show you what it would look like if we were to use a div tag. And div basically stands for a division, and it allows you to tag together groups of elements into basically generic containers. So for instance, let's say I have another heading 1, and this is something that says, we'll call it group 1, and then I have a paragraph here that says, I want to be together in group 1. So let me save that, refresh this, and we see we have divs and spans, group 1, and then the paragraph says, I want to be together in group 1. Later on, when we learn about CSS, what we want to do is add styles to particular elements in our HTML. And one way we can do that is by actually saying, okay, apply style number 1, so for instance, the color red, to all heading 1 tags. So that would just go along and say, hey, is this a heading 1 tag? Okay, this font color is now red. Is this a heading 1 tag? Okay, this font color is now red. But sometimes you actually don't want to do it by the actual element type. You want to do it by a specific division or a group of elements that you define. And the way you can do that, as we'll see later on in the CSS section, is by actually calling a div tag. And so the way it would work is you can see here I have div, and if I hit enter, notice that we automatically get this class to pop out here. And that's going to allow us to essentially name this division after a class, and then we can apply styles to that class. And we can put whatever we want in that class. So for instance, I can now put this all here, give this class a name, such as something like group 1, save this, and if I refresh this, we won't notice anything different here in the HTML. Later on, when we learn about CSS, we'll learn how to actually add style to a division with a class name instead of just actual element tags. And that's basically what we're going to be using a division for. So right now, this div tag by itself in HTML doesn't mean a whole lot. It's going to mean a lot more when we learn about CSS. So if this was a little unclear to you, especially with that class keyword, don't worry about it too much. It's going to make a lot more sense in the future. I just want to introduce it now because it really is just HTML. It's not CSS. It's used in combination with CSS. Okay, and then the last thing I want to mention here is the span tag. And basically the span tag is almost the exact same thing as a division, except it's inline instead of grabbing an entire container. So let's say we have this class, or this division of group 1. If I wanted to make essentially a little inline container to only apply effects to an inline section, so only apply effects, for instance, to these 3 letters, or 3 words here, be together and in, what I could do is wrap them in a span tag, and then put whatever I want there to be in that span. And again, I'm going to save this and refresh this here. We don't notice any difference because we haven't actually applied any style to it. But just keep these 2 keywords in mind for tagging when we later learn about CSS. Okay, so again, not a whole lot to actually show here. Basics of this lecture is just to be aware of that there's a div tag and a span tag. If their usefulness doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you right now, don't worry about it. It will make a lot more sense when we actually read or reach the CSS section of the course. Okay, thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture. Hello everyone, and welcome to Part 5, Attributes. In this lecture, we'll be talking about HTML attributes, which allow us to actually add more information to an HTML tag. And this includes things such as adding a link to another web page or referencing an image. Let's get started on all of this by jumping to the Atom text editor and our browser. Okay, here I am back at the Atom text editor, and I'm still using the basics.html file. You can use whatever HTML file you want. You can also use the Part 5 HTML attributes file that comes with the actual course notes. Here I'm just going to be editing basics.html. And we're going to need a few things. One thing we'll need is an actual image file when we talk about setting an image inside of our HTML file. And to do that, what you should do is either find on your computer or download, or just use the PNG provided for you in the notes, a .png file. And make sure you save it in the actual same directory that the HTML file you're working with is in. So you can see here, I have this basics.html file that I'm playing around with, and in the exact same directory, I have this PNG picture here, this image file. So let me now close that and show you how we can actually insert an image into our HTML. And the way we do that is with an image tag, and that's going to be img. So I'm just going to click enter here, and you'll notice you get an automatic pop-up that says src and alt, and that stands for source and alternate. And we're going to explain those in just a little bit. First thing is to notice that this is actually a self-closing tag, meaning everything here goes into this one image tag. You don't see, as we've seen before in the past, this closing tag. It just comes in one self-contained tag. So that's called a self-closing tag. And we can actually use this to source an image. So the thing I'll type here in src for the source of the image is just django.png. And then I'm going to do Control S save and then refresh this page, and you'll notice I actually get this image right here. And later on we'll learn about resizing images or squeezing them or stretching them however we want. Right now we're just using the default image size. So you can see here I said image tag, check out the source, django.png, and then an alternate, which we're about to discuss. Something to note here is that if this file is not in the exact same directory as this HTML file, you may need to put in the entire file path. But we'll discuss that much later on when we're talking about Django, when we actually want to link to a specific folder that has all our images and all our documents in it. Right now we'll keep things simple by keeping the actual image file in the same directory as the HTML file. Let's discuss this alt or alternate. Basically what this is for is an alternate thing to display in case you can't find the PNG file. So for example, let's say I type in missing.png. Now if you look at my directory here, I only have django.png. I don't have some picture called missing.png, which means I'll actually have a broken link. So if I refresh this, we see that classic broken link picture. And that basically says, hey, I couldn't find this missing.png, which means it's always a good idea to have something alternate here. So we can say something like, uh-oh, image not found. And we pass that in quotes as a string that will pop up. Now, if I save that and refresh my page, it'll say something like, uh-oh, image not found next to this little broken icon here. So that helps us out because later on when we're doing more advanced websites, I can say something like a little more specific. Missing.png not found. So when I'm debugging my website or checking stuff up, I immediately know, oh, missing.png is not found. But you'll notice if I switch this back to django.png, which is there, and I refresh my website, I don't get that alternate image or alternate text anymore. It does show up the django.png image. And that's really all there is to sourcing an image. So you have the source, src, and the alternate. Let me comment that out and refresh this page. Whoops. Save this, then refresh my page. All right. So we just discussed how to use image tags. The next thing I want to talk about is an A tag, which allows us to actually reference another HTML file or another website. To really show this, however, I will create another HTML file. So I'm going to bring up back my directory and then right-click on whatever folder I'm working on, this project folder. I'll add a new file, and this new file I'm going to call it new page.html. I'll hit enter, and then this new page.html, I'll start typing HTML, hit enter so I get all of that extra stuff, and then here on the body I'm just going to write a header or heading 1 that says this is the new page. Save that. So I have two HTML files, basics.html that we've been working with, and this new page.html that has just a single heading in it. And if I copy this full path and put it in my browser, then I get this is the new page. Great. So what I want to do is try to link this new page.html into my original basics.html page. So let's do that. I'll come back to basics.html, and to do this I'm going to use an A tag, which is just an anchor tag. And this is going to allow me to pass in a reference there, an href. And I will pass in the reference to this actual new page.html file. And I will say new page.html. And notice I don't have to pass in right now the full directory path or the full file path to this HTML file because it's in the same directory as my basics.html. If it was a different situation where this was in another folder somewhere else on my computer, I would have to specify with more detail the full file path. But we'll discuss full file paths and how you should actually create those across different operating systems when we talk about Django. Right now we'll keep things simple and make sure everything's in the same directory. Let me save this. So I have my href in my anchor tag, but notice this isn't self-closing. it has its own closing tab, which means I can put stuff in between here. And this is basically going to be the text that is a clickable link. And that's all an anchor tag does. So I can say, click me. I will save this, refresh, and now I have this attributes and this click me. And I can click on click me, and that takes me to the new page. So again, with this anchor tag, we keep a reference here, have the text that we want to show when we say click me, and then click on that, and this is the new page. So that's really all an anchor tag is. Something to note, you can reference things that are not just local on your computer, and that goes for images as well. So let me show you what I mean by that. We can pass in an actual website. So I'll say something like http www.facebook.com, and make sure you have to put in the full file path of HTTP, otherwise this won't work. And now let's change this from click me to something like Facebook. We'll save that, refresh over here, and now I see Facebook. I click on Facebook, and that actually takes me to the Facebook website. And my browser will actually self-correct this to make sure it's secure. So it goes to https://www.facebook.com. All right, so that's how you can actually reference websites that are outside of your project folder. You can just pass in the full HTTP or HTTPS file path instead of a local file. And you can actually do this exact same thing for an image tag. So for example, if we see an image here, so I see this image of, let's say, these little triangles. I'm going to open this image in a new tab. Here I have the entire image path. So I'm going to actually just copy this image path, and then instead of Django.png, I'm going to paste in that whole image path. Let's save that and go back to our original website, refresh, and we see here now we have that image. So I'm allowed to basically pass in an outside image, and you can use something like Google Image Search to actually grab a link to an image and then use that as your source instead of having to save stuff locally. Now there'll be times when you definitely want to save stuff locally in case a link ever breaks online. That way you make sure you always have a backup. Or you could just use the source online and then have maybe an alternate link or an alternate text show up. All right, so that's basically it as far as attributes and covering images and anchor tags. We've learned a ton of material to this point, so it's really time that we take a step back, make sure we've truly understood everything, and tackle an assessment exercise. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture where I explain the assessment. Everyone, and welcome to the HTML Level 1 assessment. It's time to practice all your new skills. You're going to be viewing an HTML file and recreating it based off of what you see in the browser. The file we're going to be looking at is called html_level_1_assessment.html. Let me show you how you should open this in your browser. That way you don't actually view the HTML file, you just view it in your browser. I'm going to jump to Atom Text Editor and my browser now. Okay, here I am at the Atom Text Editor, and I have my browser open. Notice here that I'm looking at a new page.html. You can be looking at any HTML file that you've created. And what I've done is I've made sure that I have here in this directory the HTML Level 1 assessment.html file. And you can find that in the course downloads. It's under the HTML Level 1 folder. There's an HTML Level 1 assessment.html file there. What you should do in order to do this exercise is don't click on this, but right click and then select copy full path and then paste that path into your browser and then hit enter. And this is what this website looks like. It says, welcome to my website. It says, I'm excited to eventually learn Django. Here's a link to the official Django website. And if we click on that link, it takes us to the actual official Django website, which is www.djangoproject.com. Notice it has HTTPS there. And going back, we see we also have a picture of the Python logo. And then it says, here are 3 reasons Django is cool. 1, it's ridiculously fast, it's reassuringly secure, and it's exceedingly scalable. And then there's a bonus optional extra credit. So what you're going to be doing is in your own HTML file, you're going to try to recreate this. So think of it while you're looking at this HTML website, what kind of tag should this have? And what kind of tag should these 3 lines have? And notice one of them is a link to another website. So think about what kind of attribute or tag that specific link should have. And then you'll notice that we also have this picture of the Python logo. What I want you to do is either download a picture of the Python logo onto your computer and then set the link locally, or what's also good practice is using the image tags we've learned about is to actually set the source to a image file that's hosted online, which is actually what the solutions do. And then you'll notice here we have a list. It's a ordered list, so 1, 2, 3. And then there's finally a bonus or optional extra credit, which is, can you figure out how to make a picture into a link? So this first picture, Python, nothing happens if I click on it. But this last one, Django, notice how it's clickable. So if I click on that picture, it will actually take me to the Django project documentation, just like this top link did. So that's extra credit to figure out how to actually make a picture into a link. We didn't cover that. I'll cover that in the solution, so that's just a bonus. Again, all you're doing is you're copying this file path into your browser, and then in this HTML file, try to manually recreate what's going on here. And I'm going to be walking through this in the next lecture for the solutions. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you there. Everyone, and welcome back to the Assessment Solutions lecture for the HTML Level 1 section. Let's get right to it by hopping to Atom Text Editor in our browser. Okay, here I have the Atom Text Editor in my browser, and I have two files open. One is the actual exercise file, this HTML Level 1 assessment, and I have this basics.html file open here in another tab. And that's what I'm going to be editing to try to match what the exercise file looks like. So let's take it step by step. The first thing I notice here in the exercise file is that my tab says exercise title. And that's a little hint that we have to actually put in a title here. So let's match that up. We'll say exercise title, save, and then refreshing this, now I see exercise title, and it matches the exercise. And then we can continue on with the rest of the body of the HTML. And here we have welcome to my website, and hopefully you're able to recognize that that's a heading 1. So we'll say welcome to my website there. And then we have a paragraph that says, I'm excited to eventually learn Django. So let's add that in. I'm excited to, we'll just say learn Django. And let's add a couple more lines to the body. I'm going to collapse the directory tree so we get a little more room here to see. Great. And then here is a little bit trickier. It says, here is the link to the official Django website. And hopefully you remember from the attributes lecture that I can use an anchor tag to actually put in a link. And an anchor tag just looks like an A. Whoops, not a capital A, just a lowercase a. And we need to add our href. So that's going to be a link to the official website. So let me put that in. That's going to be https://www.djangoproject.com. And if you needed a reference for that, all you had to do was click on that link and then mark down the URL. And then I want to add in the actual text. And I can do this on multiple lines instead of just one single long line. It's really up to you. But we'll say, here is a link to the official Django website. I'm going to save that and then refresh my basics.html. And so far it's looking pretty good. The reason it's larger right now is because I'm more zoomed in. And that's just for clarity. So I could zoom in here and see more detail. That way it's a little easier for you, the student, to view my screen. So that's all the difference in the actual sizing, but the actual elements themselves are still the same. And then we have another paragraph that says, here's a picture of the Python logo. Let's add that in. And we can tell it's another paragraph because it's starting on a new line or a new block. So we'll say, here is a pic of the Python logo. And then I want to add in a picture here. And remember, to add in a picture or an image, we use an image tag. And that's just going to be img. And here's our image tag. And what we need is a source for this image tag. And what you can do is just use Google Images to find that source. So I will open up a new tab to Google Images and search for Python logo, which looks something like this. And I can select any of these. And I just click on this. I click on View Image, and then just copy and paste this into my source. So let me save that and refresh this. And here's the picture of the Python logo. Looks like everything's matching correctly. Now let's come back here and continue on with the rest of the body. So I have my image set up. And now I have another paragraph that says, here are 3 reasons Django is cool. And notice here we have an ordered list. And remember, for an ordered list, we just type OL. And then each element in the list is an LI, or a list element. And I'm just going to paraphrase here. I'll say it's because it's fast, secure, and the last one will be scalable. And I'm saving a lot of time just by using the auto completion of Atom Text Editor. So let's save that. refresh our basics page, and here we can see the ordered list is now included. And then finally, the bonus optional extra credit was, can you figure out how to make a picture a link? And basically what we have to do is combine an anchor tag with an image tag. So usually with the anchor tags, we had an href to the actual website link, and then we had some text. What we're going to do is, instead of text here, put in an image tag. And hopefully you're able to figure it out. If you weren't able to, it's not a big deal. You will learn now. I'll put in the anchor tag. And the href I want is, again, to the actual Django project website. So I can just copy and paste this from that first link. There we go. And then inside of this anchor tag, instead of text, I want to put in an actual image tag. So I will say img. There's my image, and the source is going to be this Django. So I'll just come back to Google Images and search here for Django logo. And here's a Django logo. It doesn't really matter which one you use. Click on either one of them, click View Image, and then copy this and paste it in as the source. Save this. Let's reload our basics.html. And here I have a very large image, but that's okay. Later on, we'll learn how to resize images. But if I click on that image, the important part is it takes me to https://www.djangoproject.com. And that's basically all you had to do. Hopefully, you felt comfortable enough that you could recognize what type of elements were in a website and duplicate them in your own HTML file. That's really the point of this exercise, being able to look at a website, a very basic website, and say, oh, I know what I can do in HTML to reproduce that. All right, that's it for HTML Level 1. It should have been pretty straightforward and pretty basic as far as everything we've covered. Coming up next in the sections is HTML Level 2, where we're going to learn even more about HTML so we can know enough to lead into CSS, which will allow us to then style the HTML. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next section of the course.